Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Custom build today that cuts out at random. So this could be an awkward one because cuts out at random obviously means it's an intermittent fault. We're not sure what's wrong with it. We've got some aging hardware with some exotic mods in it here. So we've got an early 960 here. Well, it looks like an early 960 because it's one of the huge ones. 8-pin power connector on it as well, so I think that must be a 4GB one. So that's not bad. That's not bad. It's an old Novatech build by the looks of it. So we've got a Novatech power supply in the bottom right here. That is a 600 watt with a 500 watt 12 volt twin rail, 80 plus certified. So should be a good power supply. We have two hard drives that apparently are in a RAID array, so that's an awkward sticking point. Then we've got some mixed RAM in there, so it's had a RAM upgrade at some point. Can I find out what CPU is in here? Can I find out what motherboard it is? I can't see a darn thing on that note. It's Intel, I know that much. So, bleh. Anyway, okay, let's start having a look at this thing and see what we can find. So the first thing we need to do is reproduce the fault. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to start it up and start running some stress tests, and we're going to see if we can trigger the fault to occur. Because when you have an intermittent fault, obviously just waiting for the fault to occur can make diagnostics very long and tiresome. So if we can find a specific stress test that will cause it to crash or error or otherwise just show us problems, that will make testing much, much faster because we know what we're looking for then. So I'm going to get that plugged in, and I'm going to plug in a mouse and keyboard as well. I might actually have to plug in something wired. Okay, so we've got a mouse and keyboard and capture plugged in. Let's turn it on and see what it does. Let's turn it on at the back and then see what it does. There we go. So it's all kind of dusty in here, which is concerning, but I don't think that's going to be causing our problem. I'll be surprised if this thing is overheating, to be honest, but we'll see. So there's our RAID array information here. We'd like to drop it out of RAID if possible, because that's just awkward, but that's not essential and it's not relating to the problem. I have noticed some of these SATA leads stray very close to the graphics card. No, I don't think that's clipping a fan. We'd know about that if it was. You'd get a tremendous racket from it. So, yeah, okay. I'm going to start it up and we'll go from there. Oh, it stopped. Is it off? Yeah, oh, okay. It stopped just while I was switching cameras around and stuff like that. Fine, okay. Very well then. Okay, well this will be straightforward to find. Let's try it again. Let's see if it'll start a second time round. And I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. I'm going to drop it straight into memtest. I've got memtest 86 on a flash drive here. So I'm going to plug that in as well. And we're going to see if we can go straight into a memtest, because then we can just find out whether this is software related or not. It looks like it went through post, so that might just be Windows telling it to switch off there. So I'm going to be looking for the press F key for boot menu. If we even get a post screen this time. Is that just a long post? It doesn't even look like it's posting this time. Right, okay, well that's nice and straightforward. Do we have onboard video out? We do. Okay, right, well let's start simplifying this. So, turning it off at the back, let's switch back to the crane. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this big honking GTX 960 out of the way, because this will give me more clearance so I can see what I'm doing. We're going to take that out and plug it into the onboard video and see if we can get a post again. I doubt well, it could be the graphics card. Yeah, I was about to say I don't think it's going to be the graphics card, but it's way too early to be making any assumptions. So The first procedure is to start simplifying the system. Start simplifying the system until everything works consistently, and then build it back up again. Oh boy, this is quite a tightly packed computer, this. Can I get down to the... I can just get a poking device down to the graphics card eject there. There we go. Let's see. It says 04G on it, so I'm guessing it's a 4 gig 960. I like EVGA cards, to be honest. I use one at home. I like them. Based on the motherboard, I'm guessing this is 2nd or 3rd gen Intel, just based on the general layout. It's a very naff motherboard, though. It's a cheap Foxconn job. There's no cooling on the CPU regs at all, and we've only got 4-pin power going in behind the cooler here. So it doesn't get a lot of power to the CPU either, which might be a problem if they've got a like an i7 that they've dropped into this old motherboard or something like that. So right, I'm going to move my HDMI cable to the onboard HDMI out, which it doesn't have. It has got DVI though. Have I got a DVI to HDMI converter? No, of course I don't. Okay, that's a bummer. We're down to VGA in that case, and I don't have capture for VGA, so we'll see what we can do about that. We'll get it back onto the graphics card as soon as possible, just so I can give you guys proper capture. In the meantime, I'll just have to tell you what's going on. So I'm turning it back on at the back here. So power on at the back, power at the front, and let's see if we get a post. Right, it posted straight away. Let's just see if it goes into mem test. All right, it started loading Windows. We've got a Windows load screen at the moment, which I'll just show you there. There's my Windows load screen. So I'm going to, once we get into Windows, I'm going to immediately restart it and reboot into mem test, just because I want to get a nice clean mem test on this, just so I know that RAM isn't the issue. Because we've got mixed RAM, we've got these 2 blue modules, and there are two more modules under the CPU cooler that don't have heat sinks on them. So because we've got mixed RAM, we just want to run that through mem test and just make sure that we can just take that out of the equation straight away. And then after that, I think the next step will be to do some testing with this graphics card. Maybe plug that into another machine and just see if we can reproduce the faults there. It looks like we might have a Duff graphics card, is my early guesses at this point. Of course, we also need to consider that if there's a problem with the power supply, it may work without the graphics card because there's less of a load on the power supply. So that's also a consideration. I've been waiting patiently and there's still no video output. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm just going to wait and see if, given enough time, it actually starts outputting something. And just while I wait for that, I'm just going to point something else out as well that's got me concerned. This is the filter for the power supply. Which has never ever been cleaned. This is why I mount my power supplies upside down, people. I always get hate in the YouTube comments for mounting my power supplies fan side up. This is why I do it. No one cleans their filter. And this just immediately makes me suspect that the power supply has cooked itself. So yeah, that's why I do it. Y'all laughed at me. Y'all laughed at me. One clean with the air compressor later. Right, I pushed the restart button on the front of the computer and nothing happened. I turned it off at the back and then turned it back on and it immediately restarted. And now I'm not getting any output either. So it looks like we're not at a safe point yet. It never did get to Windows. So there's something funny going on there. We've got no hot air coming off of the CPU cooler. So I'm going to power that off one more time. And I'm going to wait and just press the power button a couple of times just to drain that power supply. So the power supply, as I say, the power supply is okay, but I think it's been cooked at one point in its lifetime. Right, I turned it back on again. Let's see if it will give me another post. I tell you what I should do is I should make up a little custom diagnostic thing that I can plug into the front panel connector that just gives me pre-wired LEDs and power button, just so I don't have to mess about with the case stuff while I'm doing diagnostics. It's very helpful when that stuff is built into the motherboard, but nah. No, we've got no VGA output now either, and it was giving us VGA output before. Well, it looks like we're back to square zero with this. So, okay, I think what we're going to do next is I'm going to plug in a different power supply, and we're going to try that because I have big concerns about this power supply. I think this power supply is cooked. So let's get the Antec. Okay, right, powering up on the Antec power supply. So having the computer post this time doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's consistent posting I need. Right, and it has posted straight away. Now, because the drives aren't powered up, we should see it drop into mem test now, which it has done. So I'll just show you what's going on the screen. As aforementioned, we're on VGA output at the moment, so I'll just brutally turn my camera sideways. And as you can see, we're now running mem test. We've got an i7-2600 here, so it is an i7, and it is second gen. So it looks like I was about on the mark with the rough age and spec of this thing. We've got 8 gigs of RAM total, so I'm going to sit and let that run through and just make sure that that RAM works just fine. So I'll get back to you on that one. I'm still betting on power supply, but now it's working. Well, technically what I should do is give it a couple of power cycles just to see if it starts messing me about. But then on the other hand, if it consistently runs mem test and then I plug the old power supply in and start having problems, then we know that it's a power supply issue. So I'm going to let it run mem test because then we can just take that off the board straight away. While it's working, we'll let it run. Cool, I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, we've done a complete pass and we have no errors, so I'm happy that there's nothing wrong with the memory at all. So we can just scrub that off the whiteboard entirely now. There's no memory issues at all, that's not our problem. So what we're going to do next is I think I'm going to drop the graphics card back in and I'm going to get some power onto the drives and give it a couple of reboots and just see if the problems have actually disappeared or not. Because if I can just plug everything back in and the problems are gone, then that leaves a really big smoking gun on the power supply. So let's do that. Right, I'm just going to temporarily rewire these just so I can hang them out the side of the case instead. It's very tidy to put the wiring around the back. However, on a case that doesn't have a window, it's kind of pointless. I have to admit I do this myself, but I actually am trying to break that habit because at times like this, it serves no useful purpose at all. So I'm actually going to turn these drives around. Oops, that's not turning it around. Okay, that's sufficiently wired back up again. Let's give it another whirl, and this time we can have Hood Me again. Okay, power on, power on. Okay, and we've got no post. That doesn't look promising. That doesn't look promising at all. Looks like I may have started running before we were walking just then. I got one lucky post and was just like, oh, it's fine. We haven't had a beep out of it this time either because I got the beep speaker plugged in. So I know that it actually hasn't posted. Okay, right, power off then. Let's drop the graphics card back out and let's see if we can run it with the hard drives connected. Could it be the hard drives? Right, okay. VGA. Power on, let's go. Alright, and once again, we still have no post. I'm going to power it off again. And I'm going to unplug the hard drives, because that was the last known good configuration. Power off. Unplug those hard drives. The hard drives are nothing fancy, they're just Seagate Barracuda 500 gigabyte. Right, I turned on the power supply and it immediately turned back on. That may have happened just because I didn't wait long enough between shutdowns. Because after you switch off the power supply, it can actually take like 10 or 15 seconds before the 5-volt rail, the standby rail, turns off. And so that can sometimes upset systems. So let's just power cycle that one last time. And I'm going to spam the power button while the power supply is off just to try and drain that. The Antec gives quite a distinctive tick when the standby circuit turns off. Which it just ticked. Okay. Right. Okay, let's try that one more time. Power on. And it hasn't turned on by itself that time, so let's try it again. I think we're going to be doing a BIOS reset in a sec. Although I'm not expecting that to make any difference because it's an intermittent post. If we had no post, I would have gone straight to the BIOS reset, but this intermittent posting is really causing an issue. It looks like we've cleared the power supply at this point because I'm having issues while we're on the Antec. And we're getting no beep from this, so we're not posting. Okay, I'm going to turn it off and we're going to do a BIOS reset. Power off. And I'm going to pop that BIOS battery out. Where's my plastic prying tool? Okay, BIOS battery is out. I'm going to leave that for 5 minutes. And we're back. Let's see what it does. BIOS battery in, power switch on, power at the front. Well then. Okay. Right, well, I'm going to do one last ditch attempt. I'm going to turn it off at the back again, and we're going to unplug everything else that can be unplugged. I'm starting to think that this motherboard is shagged. So let's just unplug everything else. There's a lot of just general stuff plugged into this. Which shouldn't be causing a problem, but it might. Right, I know those are correct. I've already checked those pins. Unplug the rear fan because I can. Make sure that's not fouling anything. Okay, we're going to give this one more shot and then we're taking the CPU cooler off. And we're going to inspect the CPU. And there's still nothing. Okay, CPU cooler's coming off. Power off at the back. I'm going to unplug the Antec because it's not helping. It's clearly not our problem, so we'll take that out of the equation again. I'm not expecting to see anything wrong under the CPU because it works sometimes. Well, that much being said, there's some dust there. Okay. I'm going to grab the brush and just brush that out. I'm not sure if that just dropped in there as soon as I opened it up. It could have. We've got no issues with bent pins or anything though. That CPU socket looks pristine, and easiest way to tell is just to move your eyesight back and forth across, and you'll see as the light changes refraction, any imperfections in the pin grid there will become very obvious as you move back and forth, because you'll see the reflection shifting. So let's just stick that guy back in there, drop him in, give it a wiggle, close the lid again. Cool. Right, there's nothing to see there. I'm going to perch my spare cooler on top of that, so I don't know if we're taking this back off again. So we'll just plug that in. I very much doubt that it's anything to do with the CPU at this stage at the moment. I think it's more likely to be a bad motherboard, but we'll see. I'm also inclined to drop down to... I'm tempted to drop down to fewer RAM modules as well, because we have passed the RAM test, but we might have some of those modules that they only work intermittently. When they work, but when they don't work, it doesn't post. That would also explain our problem. So that is something to consider. So yeah, okay, right. Let's plug the CPU power back in. Let's just do that, and then perch our cooler again. Just make sure that's sitting on top of the CPU so it doesn't burn up. That's fine. Okay, power on and power. Okay, I'm not getting a beep again, and we should have had a beep by now. So I'm going to start dropping memory out of this thing. Is that in properly? It is. Alright, well, only just, but it's in enough to work. I'd feel better if that locking lever would close though. Okay, no, that's not posting. Power off. I'm going to take all the RAM out. What do we got here? We've got some Corsair Vengeance LP that looks fairly modern. That's DDR3 1600. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, 2 times 2 gigabytes. Well, that's... Oh, yeah, 2 times 2 gigabytes. That's fine. I thought those were 4 gigabyte modules for a minute there, and I was going to say that's not right. And we got some cheap-ass budget RAM. 2 gigabytes. DDR3 240. I can't remember what's... No, that's 240 pin. Not sure what speed that's supposed to be. But again, it's budget stuff. The RAM slots look okay. I'm just going to fit a single module in slot 2, which would be the correct start point for one module. So let's do that and just see if we get a consistent post out of the new stuff. Nothing doing there. Okay, power off. Try another one in there. Still nothing. Okay, I'm going to try and move into slot 1. Still nothing. I've seen it start. Come on, give me something. Let me know you're still vaguely alive, please. What happens if I boot it with no RAM installed? Will I get an error beep from it? That'd be more life than I'm seeing at the moment. Right, we're getting no beep at all still. So the fact that it's not beeping with no RAM in it at all, you know, we've got our beeper connected and we're getting nothing out of that. That generally implies that there's something very low level wrong with this, because it's not even getting as far as to check the RAM. So I think we're kind of down to CPU or motherboard here. and it's never the CPU except when it is, but it's never the CPU except when it is. So I tell you what though, I think I might have a spare 2nd gen Intel CPU knocking about just in my spares box. I'm going to have a quick look for that. Okay, so I've done a little poking around. I found on one of the barcode stickers, not this one, there's one behind the CPU down there. This little sticker down here has got H67M-V on it, which identifies this as a H67 motherboard. And that is the 3rd generation refresh chipset of the H series. It is, although we've got a 2nd gen CPU in here, it is actually a 3rd gen refresh motherboard. Now I've done a hunt around, can't find my spare CPU, but I do have another motherboard. Oh, I'm a moron. I was going to say I've got a spare computer kicking around that's got a H61 motherboard in it, which is also compatible with a 2nd gen CPU, and I've just realized that is going to have a spare CPU in it as well. So we do actually have some compatible swap products in. So I'm going to take that one to bits and we'll start swapping some CPUs and motherboards around. But before we go any further, I'm going to lift this out the case and we're going to start bench testing out of case now, because we're into the lands of, is it the CPU or is it the motherboard? And I'm expecting it to be the motherboard, because it's never the CPU, except when it is. Right, let's get this motherboard out of here so we can clear up the desk slightly, because we're taking up a colossal amount of space to do very small amounts of testing. And while there's nothing on the bench, I'm going to do a quick post-test on my donor computer just to make sure that this thing actually starts and runs. There's not a lot in this computer. Oh, we've got a green light on the monitor. Yeah, that looks fine. And this has got a 2nd gen Intel CPU in it as well, according to the post screen. So that is a good match. All right, that's fine. I'm not going to take this thing apart quite yet. I'm going to bench test the other motherboard first. Also, while we're here, let's just check there's no horrifying things on the bottom of the board. Which there isn't, because there never is. But it doesn't cost anything to look. Yeah, it's fine. Dust bunnies, that's all. Alright, and let's jumpstart this by shorting the power on pins together. No, that was reset. There we go, that's power on. Now, this thing's doing nothing. Okay. Right, I'm going to rob the CPU out of the other system. So I'm going to unplug that. And I'm going to push all of this to the back of the bench. And bring the donor computer back up again. And we're going to rob the CPU out of this thing, which is a known good. Or at least it posts. Right, and I'm going to clean this. I'm going to clean this thing up just for posterity, because that is all completely dry, and I'm only perching coolers in place at the moment, and I don't want to run that risk. It's incredibly unlikely that it will cause a problem, but you know, it doesn't cost anything to clean the CPU. And I've just squirted a bit of alcohol on top of this just to break down the thermal paste. Okay, so we've got a Core i3-2120 here. That's a shame, I thought it was an i5. Oh no, it says i3 on the front. Fine. Oh, yep, i3 2nd gen. And it's a 3.3 gigahertz. That's not bad. I think I use this computer for imaging hard drives or something like that. It's just one of the kick-around ones that I have. Not bad. Right, let's put this to one side. And I'm going to have another look at that CPU socket. No, there's definitely no problems in there. Alright, so I'm expecting this to not work because it's never the CPU. So we're expecting no post. Of course, it is also an intermittent fault, so it might work, but we need consistent working, so... And jump start. Right, we've had no beep. I'm going to leave that for a sec while I go and get a coffee, just to give it the benefit of the doubt. Right, that's doing nothing at all. It's time to swap out to the other machine then. And I'm going to clean up the CPU that's come out of the dead machine. Which is an i7-2600 as previously confirmed. Right, that's in place. Let's give it some power. And turn it on. Right, so this one we're expecting to work. And if this works, then it's almost certainly a motherboard issue. And I haven't plugged in a VGA lead. Plugged in a VGA lead and the monitor has gone green light. And we have a post with the correct CPU as well. And it's gone straight to no boot disk detected, which again I'll just show you there just for posterity. No boot disk. Okay. Right, well, it looks like this motherboard is shot. Let's change out the RAM, and then we're done. And it's a new motherboard issue. Yeah, okay, let's power that off. I'm going to steal the RAM out of that. I'm not expecting this to make any difference whatsoever because we've done a lot of testing with the RAM. And we've seen no credible evidence that there is a RAM issue here. But we'll just do it one more time with some known good, just in case. If I'm going to tell someone that their motherboard is dead, I want to be certain. Alright, I'm not even going to bother putting a cooler on that. I'm just going to stick my fingers on it because I don't think it's going to work. No. It's not working. We have no post, we have no beep. There's not even any heat on the CPU. No, this thing is cactus. Alright, so as per usual, it's never the CPU. So these guys need a new motherboard. So now because this is second gen, replacing this motherboard is going to be a pain in the arse because finding old gen motherboards is a pain in the arse. So they've got a couple of options. They can either take this as a queue to upgrade and they can buy a new CPU motherboard and RAM, or I might have a dig around and just see if I have anything else other than my spare computer, and I might see if I can find them a donor board because I think I have more than one scrapper computer in this shop. So I might be inclined to try and flog them the tester board that we've just used, just so they can keep using this i7. Although, to be honest, this is a second gen i7, so even like a fourth gen i5 will probably keep up with this no problem whatsoever. And if they moved on to a modern i5 or even a modern i3, then it would probably get destroyed because, you know, you look at it and you go, oh, i7, it's got to be pretty good. It's like, yeah, but it's second gen. That's really old. Second gen is ancient now. You know, that's going back to like 2011, I think. You know, it's 8 years old. It's a long time. So yeah, just because it's an i7 doesn't mean it's good. It means it's not bad. Anyway, I'm going to talk to the client and see what they want to do with that. I'll be back. Right, and here I was thinking that I was going to show you guys me eBaying for another H61 motherboard. No. I called up the client and he said, well, that's very convenient because I have £500 set aside to fix this thing. I said, awesome, let's upgrade it. So I've got a MSI Z398 Pro motherboard here. with 8 gigs of DDR4. So we're taking a slight hit in the memory, but you know, we were working with 500 quid here. I wanted to keep the easy stuff easy. Very easy to add in more RAM later on. Don't forget that. 16 gigs is nice, but very easy to upgrade later. We've got a shiny new SSD to go in there as well. And the best of the best, this is the bit that I'm super stoked about. We've got an i5 9600K. Super tasty. So we're going to be putting that in there, that in there, that in there, and the whole lot into that tin box Novatech case. Let's go. Okay, right. So I've given the case a bit of a dust out. I haven't sterilized it, but you know, it's an old Novatech case. This computer isn't a looker at the moment. However, I would imagine that at some point it will be a really good candidate for a really nice case swap. So you know, maybe we'll see it again in the future. So I know there's probably going to be some of you going, oh, that's such a shame to put all that hardware into this case, but I know, but performance first. Always function over form, I'm afraid. Right, I'm just tucking all of these wires out the way so we can offer up the new motherboard and see where that fits. Let's just get all of those. Alright, so we've only got 6 standoffs in this, where it previously had a micro board in it, didn't it? Yeah. So we're going to need to find some more standoffs that are compatible. This board uses the standard 9 layout, which is quite nice. So that makes my life easier. So these two have got to move to the outer points, and then we've got to put another 3 along the back. So let's take one of these out and check what size it is. That's a good match. Standoffs are not standard, however, they're common. So it's not too difficult to find spares, basically. Right, there's 3 extra standoffs. So we're sorted. This is comparatively quite a large board we're putting in, so it's going to look very different on the inside when we're done. However, because this case doesn't have a window, we won't get to see any of the goodness, unfortunately. And we'll pop out the old I/O panel. And in goes the new. Right, this is ready to go in. However, before it goes in, I'm going to mount up the CPU cooler because I always make this mistake. If I put the CPU cooler mounts on it now, I won't have to take all the back apart. So actually, I'm taking this off the bench again. I've been trying to get into the habit of remembering to fit CPU coolers before putting the motherboard in, because it's so much easier to do it when the board is out of the case. But my standard procedure for building is always motherboard in first, because then you can see where everything goes. There we go. Just make sure that's good at the back, which it is. Right, and just as I'm putting the motherboard in, I'm checking at the back of the computer to make sure that none of the I/O panel sticky outy bits, like these boys here, make sure that none of these flaps are sticking into ports. Classic mistake that I still regularly see. And not that long ago, I made that mistake myself. Very easy mistake to make. Oh, that makes me sad. I picked a specific standoff that had the sticky uppy bit on it, and it doesn't fit. Oh well. Okay, let's hook up all the obvious stuff again. So luckily we don't really need to worry about the cable tidy job in this case, because there's no case window, so we can just shove everything in as and where it falls. And because this motherboard is quite a wide one, it goes all the way out to the end of the standard ATX markers. We've got lots of screws holding it in place, so we don't need to worry about motherboard bending. And unlike the previous board, we've got a nice 8-pin power connector going into our CPU now. None of this 4-pin rubbish. Okay, right. Now, we're not going to be able to boot this straight off of the hard drives because the hard drives were raided and we're going on to a different RAID controller. That's not going to work. To save the customer's data, I'm actually going to have to rig up the old system again. This is going to be tough. I'll get back to you on that. I'm going to leave the hard drives disconnected for a sec. And we'll just get everything else hooked up first. What's this? Have we got front? Yeah, we've got front eSATA. Yeah, I guess we'll hook that up. Doesn't cost anything. Okay, let's drop in our M2 SSD. And we've got to move our standoff for that, which is quite unusual. Oh, okay. I guess we won't use that screw. Have MSI supply me with a screw for the M2 slot. They have. Why didn't they just put that on the board? A packet for a single screw. Okay, in goes our i5 9600K. I almost wish I'd told the client, oh yeah, we'll put an 8600K in there, because then I could have put that in my computer at home. Okay, and we're just going to clean up the old thermal paste from the CPU cooler, which it had good thermal paste on it, but this stuff is really, this dark grey stuff is always very thick and goopy. And it doesn't reuse very well. Occasionally I reuse thermal paste, you know, just when you look at it and you're like, that stuff is fine, it's going to spread out nice and thin again. But this stuff is kind of had it, really. That's probably been on and off at least more than a couple of times. So I'm just going to put a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on that just to thin it out. You don't have to use alcohol. You can just use a tissue until clean. Alcohol just makes this job a lot easier. There we go. So when you encounter that stuff that's called TIM remover or thermal interface material remover, it's basically alcohol on a wipe. That's all it is. And it's also worth noting that this looks like a really wonderful mirror finish we've got here, but don't be deceived by these. Most likely this was most likely machined, and then it was probably tin plated or copper plated. So this hasn't been lapped to a shine, it's just been plated again. And that means that you don't actually get any benefit because you've got to go through the plating, and then there's another interface between the plating and the actual core of the heatsink. So this kind of mirror finish isn't necessarily a good thing. I'm not sure how you tell the difference between plated and actually lapped, but no manufacturing process is going to give you a genuinely lapped to mirror finish. That's just not going to happen. It would be too expensive. I think one way of telling is, if you have a look at the edge of this thing, can you see how it's a nice beveled edge there? I think if this thing had actually been sanded, we wouldn't have a nice rounded finish. It would be quite a sharp edge. That's just my take. I think you can see that bevel. Can you just see where the light is bent around the curve on the edge there? I think that's how you know that it's been plated rather than lapped. That's just my 2 pence anyway. I actually trust coolers that have a smooth but not mirror finish. I actually trust those more than plated ones. Still, it's a nice big cooler, got lots of heat pipes in it. It'll do fine. Let's put some fresh thermal paste on. I use Arctic MX4. It's very cheap and it's very good. It's not the best thermal paste there is out there. However, it is a middle performing thermal paste that costs a couple of quid on eBay. So yeah, it works. And as you can see, I've just put a bit of a squidge down the middle. That's probably too much, to be honest, but whatever. So let's put this guy back on. And how does this, that's got to go down the middle there first. Oh, I'm just going to give that a brush with the paintbrush, just so I'm not putting more dust into the laptop, into the desktop. All right, and that's going to sit on there. I'm just going to squidge that down slightly. All right. And we'll just pilot the screws into place. Okay, that's one. Now we'll just relocate that. Get it back into alignment. And we're going to take these screws all the way down to the stops. We don't need to grunch it tight. It's not the tightness of the screw that's doing the work here. It's the spring that's on the screw. That is what's providing our downward force. So we're putting the screws in just to make sure that it doesn't fall out. They don't need to be tight. They just need to be up to the stop. There we go. And I can give that just a little bit of a wiggle so we know it's not too tight. And let's come in with our fan, which I have also dusted off. Again, I haven't sterilized it. That just doesn't really matter. And I think I'm going to plug this in advance because I don't think we're going to have much space down there once this fan is in position. Okay, so this uses the dual clip mechanism. And that goes around that way. So the first one is always the easiest. I just sort of... Oh, let me just move the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. There we go. So I start by just putting the first clip on the fan. Get that fan in position and then hook that on. And then it falls off. This is where these types of coolers can be a bit of a pain. Is that on? Huh. Okay, that's kind of loose fit, but it's hooked on. Okay, let's put the other one on, I guess, and then drop it on the motherboard. Huh. Is that it? Yeah, well, it's not going to fall off. Okay, that was very loose. Normally those are very fiddly to put on, but okay. I'm content that that's not going to fall off. So, okay. One CPU cooler, done. All right. Graphics card. Let's go and get that big old 960. Right, so in comes the graphics card, which again, I've given a bit of a dust off. So let's just measure that up. We need to move the PCI brackets down a bit. So in the old days, obviously the first PCI slot was at the top of the ATX chassis. However, they moved it down a bit to give better clearance for CPU coolers and stuff like that, which was quite a nice change of pace, because it also looks a lot nicer because it brings some of the parts just further down into the case. So we'll just move this blanking plate up to the top slot, and then our graphics card will fit back in. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to do a quick post test on this. So let's get it hooked up. Then I need to do a test rig to see if I can set up an environment that those RAIDed hard drives will boot in. Now, the nearest motherboard I've got is a H61 chipset, and I think we had a H67 on the original, but the RAID controllers might be similar enough that I can boot that RAID array on my spare motherboard. And that would be awesome, because if I can get that RAID array to boot up, I can then take a snapshot image of it, and I can convert it into a non-RAIDed Windows install, which we can then move on to the SSD, which means we can do all of this and preserve user data, and that would be really awesome. Okay, and it's power cycled, which is perfectly normal for a brand new motherboard. There's the debug LEDs. Let's just see those chase across. Oh, CPU or memory change. That's good enough for me. I'm going to F1 to run setup. All right, there we go. And there's our BIOS screen. And we're seeing our Core i5-9600. Let me just put that on big screen just so you can see it all. Josh. Cool, right, so up in the corner here, we've got i5-9600 at 3.7. That's behaving as it should, and we can see our 8 gigs of RAM. So that is all hunky-dory. Right, okay, let's go and investigate the data scenario and find out whether this guy is going to lose his data or not. Because, of course, where that's in a RAID array, that's actually kind of a pain in the ass to get to that. Oh, well, that's good enough for me. Okay, so since trying to connect the drives up to a similar period motherboard was a bust, I just plugged them back in, went into the BIOS and set the BIOS on the new motherboard into RAID mode, and it actually just detected the two member disks and just, yeah, it just started working. So yeah, it looks like, I have to admit, I haven't used RAID much. I'm not a fan of RAID, but in this instance, it was a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. And as you can see, it's actually the Windows 10 install from the RAID array is actually trying to boot up now, and it's redetecting all the devices on the new one. Thanks to the miracle of Windows 10, you can just drop its drive into a completely different computer, and it will just sort itself out. So what I'm going to do now is, once we're into Windows 10, I'll take a full backup of the contents, and then we'll reinstall Windows 10 onto the crucial SSD, restore the data there, and we'll wipe and de-RAID these two disks. I mean, well, I suppose I could leave them in RAID. I'll see what the customer wants to do. But yeah, we're basically done. So, okay, so we've got it started. What I did in the end was I plugged the drives back in, I went into BIOS, and I set the SATA controller into RAID mode, and it just detected the RAID array. Which was an awful lot more simpler than I thought it would be. Maybe I haven't looked at RAID in too long. Maybe I was just never that good with RAID, but I thought that you had to have the drives on in a certain configuration to have them all connected in the right order, otherwise it wouldn't work and all of that. But I plugged them in, set it in RAID mode, and it just booted up. Windows had a worldwide hissy fit, of course, because all of the hardware has changed. However, after giving it time to sort itself out, it's just booted back up. So what I can do now is I can take a system image of this Windows install, and then I can image it across to the SSD, which means that the customer doesn't have to reinstall all of his apps and stuff like that. And then once we've done that, I can erase the hard drives, and what I'll probably do is I will either erase them and just have 2 extra data hard drives in here, or I'll just put them in a JBOD array, which is just a RAID array that just simply combines their storage. There's no there's no speed advantage to it. It's just a very simple RAID array, and that will leave us sorted out. So we're all done past that point. That's everything sorted. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.